Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins, filling in. Thrilled to be with you. Chad is back just after the holidays. It is now apparently a holiday tradition for me to bring in a radio friend of mine, Brian Noonan, to hang out for a little bit. Brian, welcome to Chad's Show.
Always a pleasure to be here, Craig. Thank you. Happy holidays. The tradition is fantastic.
There we go. Okay. I'm thrilled for a lot of things. At some point, I think we'll probably get to New Year's resolutions and whatnot, even though I don't think you make them, right?
I don't make resolutions. I just am always looking to evolve because I'm an evolved human being.
How does that work out for you?
Not well.
Okay. All right.
I'm sitting here on a stump in my underpants.
I think that CNN is evolving, if I'm going to try to transition this as best as I can. First, Allison Camerata, and I'm not trying to say that with a lot of praise for anyone worried. Allison Camerata did say a couple things that I thought could have fit very well on other broadcast stations, say about a year ago. First, though, she's referencing the new testing in D.C. for schools, for teachers to get back into classrooms and whatnot. Obviously, this is an odd announcement, an odd restriction, an odd requirement because, well, it's really hard to get tests.
Okay, so this just in, Washington, D.C.'s mayor just announced that all students and staff must show proof of a negative test before returning to school on January 5th. That's the first time that we're hearing that kind of mandate in Washington.
She used that topic to then introduce a medical guest of her own, and it's just this part of the audio, and maybe I'm being overly, specific about diving into this. I can't help it. It's this part of the audio that really interests me. She starts to talk about the tests in general and the availability of them, the reliability of said tests. She plays some audio with Dr. Fauci that I'm going to keep in here, and then the tone and the question she asks are most important.
Just start with testing, okay? Because as you know, so many people are desperate for reliable at-home tests. And that's why I need your help understanding what Dr. Fauci said about these at-home tests yesterday.
The tests are still worthwhile. Don't let anybody think that the FDA was saying the tests are no longer good. They say they're less sensitive now. They never were 100% sensitive. Some of the tests have a diminution further of the sensitivity, but they still say the tests are useful and should be used.
Okay, a diminution of the sensitivity. Does that mean that the at-home rapid tests work to detect Omicron or not?
Come on, Brian Noonan. The tone of that sounds very much like other things people have said. I know it's a very specific scenario here, but that the laughter with the medical term, or I guess just the fancier way to say a reduction.
Fancy English.
Fancy English. Everything about that scenario feels like you could have seen it on other platforms much longer ago. And so I've said this before. It's sort of like the party finally let in new people who are at least questioning some of the things and some of the ways in which these things are communicated to the public, including now CNN and Allison Camerata. Yes, no?
Oh, yeah, 100%. There's a tad bit of mockery in her tone as she questions the diminution. And there's also a very valid point. How can a school district, and I know school districts around the country are starting to do this, saying we need these negative tests? You can't get negative tests. You can't. I've been following all these stories of people waiting in line for hours and hours, not only at the testing sites, but at drugstores trying to find the at-home tests.
Yeah.
You cannot get them. There's these little sketchy pop-up clinics all over in different neighborhoods. Come on in, get a test. They do a rapid test, then you never hear the results of the long-term test.
Well, and yeah.
It is time to start. It is time to say, okay, how do we
navigate this? Exactly. How do we navigate this?
And are these tests actually worthwhile at home?
Even better, to ask the second question, how accurate are they? And honestly, a thing I've been talking about a lot in the last few days is how valuable are the positive case numbers compared to other numbers now. That is a uniquely changing thing in the world of COVID, or something that maybe a lot of people feel probably should have been thought of sooner. But at least positive cases compared to actual serious illness and hospitalization are going to be very different than they've been in the past. But I have to ask you about this in relation to that, reliability of testing conversation. Did you hear about this woman who's on a flight to Iceland? And did you hear about her or no?
I did. She sat in the bathroom for 5 hours.
She did. So she's on a flight to Iceland. And here's the parts of the scenario I don't understand. She brought rapid tests with her on her carry-on luggage onto a flight that she was taking. She did not feel ill, according to the story I read, until she was halfway through her flight.
Correct.
And then she felt a sore throat, and so she took a rapid test. It came back positive, and she quarantined herself inside of a bathroom on the plane for 5 hours, as you said. There is a significant chance, I'm not saying, incredibly high, that it was just an error in the test and she did this accidentally, or she's one of those people who knew she was sick with COVID, got on the plane anyway, and then created an elaborate story. I don't know which one you feel it could be.
I'm going to go with both. First of all, COVID doesn't, I'm not a medical expert. Let's put that out there.
Sure.
So I don't want you being accused of putting on some fake medical expert. I'm not. But COVID doesn't just pop on, 2 hours into a flight. You're like, oh, I'm feeling sick.
Is that how that works?
You get on well, I'm guessing. You got to guess before you get on. The time for a test is prior to that. Yeah. And there are false positives. A good friend of mine called me the other day because we had been in contact. She was like, oh, I just tested positive. I ran out, got a test. I was negative. 2 days later, she got her results, her long-term results. She was like, no, I'm not positive.
Yeah.
This was so there's a lot of false positives. You're right. You're right in your scenario about the numbers being vastly different. There's going to be a lot more positive cases now with this Omicron because it does have, for vaccinated and boosted people, much smaller effects.
I would jump in and say for all people, 80% of all cases in the places that it's been studied in the UK, in Africa, places where they have very low vaccination rates, the seriousness of that illness has been very similar to the numbers we're seeing here, tremendously less likely to have anything more than essentially, and I know some people are saying this now, and it's making some uncomfortable, akin to symptoms of the common cold. That is a majority of cases. Of course, it's still COVID and not a cold, but essentially for a lot of people, and I think, again, I think I'm just changing the number, rounding it a little bit, but 80% less likely for you to be seriously ill, but much more infectious. So challenges abound. What I also think is interesting, though, about the story of the woman on the flight, she sounds like a person who's tremendously afraid of COVID, if I'm going to just project a little bit more onto her, because if she got on a flight with rapid tests and tested herself while on the flight because of a scratchy throat, I feel like she was tremendously afraid to fly. And then, much like, I guess, Allison Camerata is questioning Fauci, she might be questioning Fauci because he did recently say that on a flight with a mask, even if you're not vaccinated, that medically that is probably safe while talking about potential mandates for vaccine requirements for domestic travel. So I think that maybe she's the type of person that might have been overly worried to travel to begin with.
Are you saying she may suffer from COVID hysteria, Greg? Is that what you're postulating? Because I could agree with that. And listen, how are people not becoming hysterical? Because all we're inundated with is this variant is you can catch it just walking out to take out the trash. It's out there. It's lurking behind the dumpster. And
it depends on the time of day.
It's everywhere. Well, that's true. That's why I only take my trash out for a 2-hour window in the middle of the day.
There we go.
When Omicron takes its coffee break.
Right. I'm glad that you're following that mandate. It's very important. One other quick thing before we get out of here for a quick break. I do want to ask you about this, though. Kyrie Irving is back playing basketball for the Brooklyn Nets. He was tremendously happy, one, to be, again, a professional athlete who plays the sport he's a profession of. And two, very, I think, apologetic and somewhat politically correct in talking about his gratefulness with the organization that hasn't been letting him play basketball. I will play some audio. I was surprised that he wasn't a little more, I don't know. I don't know what the right word would be. I know that they pay the checks. They're the ones deciding to let him be on a court or not. But you would think after this much time not getting to play because of his choice to make a medical decision that now he would be a little more frustrated during this interview. That's at least my opinion. Let's try it out.
I understood their decision and I respected it. I really had to sit back and think and try not to become too emotionally attached, to what they were deciding to do. I had to sit down and really evaluate things and see it from their perspective, meaning the organization and my teammates. I just really empathized, and I understood their choice to say if you're not going to be vaccinated, fully vaccinated, then you can't be a full participant. And I knew the consequences. I wasn't prepared for them by no stretch of imagination.
I think it's really interesting that he says he knew but wasn't prepared for the actual reality of the consequences.
Sure, he bought too many houses.
And also, this is a guy who at one point said that he thought the earth was flat. And then apologized, I think, on social media for saying that, especially to science teachers. But I would say that this is a fairly well-reasoned and intelligent sounding person talking about an ability to play basketball again, which is not something I expected for some reason.
Well, his team that's behind him, he's got agents and managers and all sorts of people who crafted this. This was not Kyrie coming out of his house with the, he didn't jot this down at the kitchen table and then come out. This was carefully crafted to make sure that the NBA doesn't impose any more fines or discipline on him.
Sure.
He's towing the company line, saying what he needs to say to get back into making that big money that he's making, which I don't begrudge a guy making the big money, but at least somewhere in that statement, he or whoever wrote it said, I knew the consequences.
They did.
And okay, then you faced them. Now you move on. And I appreciate the statement. I don't, let's be honest. It's not him genuine. When he's behind closed doors, he's complaining up and down.
How dare you?
As frustrated as you said.
How dare you insinuate that athletes say something different to the media than what they say behind closed doors?
Listen, there's nobody who doesn't say something different to the media. You know that.
No, I know. Would it be great if
Kyrie's just happy he didn't fall off the earth, as you mentioned before.
Yeah, and probably he's a little bit regretful that he didn't go the Aaron Rodgers play and just claim to be immunized for a while and get the other version of treatment up until they figure out that was very strategic, kind of Anthony Fauci versions of speaking, Dr. Fauci. All right, we're going to take a break. A lot more. Brian Noonan hanging out with me. Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show.
Deep states? No. Deep doo-doo? Yeah. The Chad Benson Show.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. Chad is back after the holidays. Much-deserved vacation for him, and I hope he's paying attention to no news because that's what I like to do. Brian Noonan, radio host, hanging out with me as well because it's the holiday, so I don't want to spend it alone. I don't listen to anyone that tells you to spend the holiday alone, and I did not ask you for your vaccine status, by the way, Noonan, before you jumped on with us.
No, but you're keeping me at a safe distance, which is, I don't blame you.
I want to first touch on some of the news of the day, including a professor. This guy is a professor of, I think, economics. I hope economics for what he's about to say. He did an interview last night talking about what President Biden could do to actually have a more effective few years left in office. There's no chance, I think, that Biden will be in office beyond the 3 remaining years of this term. And I think that it's very optimistic, I will say it this way, to expect this change to occur. But I don't actually think this professor is wrong. And I'm about to play the audio so you'll know what he's suggesting. If our president did try to go this road, much like, say, a Joe Manchin, he would face a lot of pushback from his party. But it might help a lot in the things he's trying to get passed and get done as far as remaining agenda items.
At this point, what the president really needs to do in 2022 is make a sharp break with the left. He has to start saying and doing things that are uncomfortable to his left-wing base. He has to say, we need to get workers back on the job. We're going to drop all of these mandates. We've got to keep schools open. We're going to take that off of the table. He needs to set the stage for businesses to hire and people to work. It's as simple as that. If he does that, we can make progress on inflation faster. If he doesn't do that, Jackie, we're going to have this conversation for a really long time.
Here's the thing. I don't believe, and I know I'm not alone in believing this is not a expert take by any stretch, Noonan. I don't believe that Biden is one of those leaders, politicians, whatever you want to call him, who's willing to ever go against the grain and lead a party. I think that's why he was so unsuccessful at convincing someone like a Joe Manchin to side with him, as opposed to believe that rampant inflation could get much worse after you spend a bunch of additional money at the time of the year, at the time that we're in right now in our society and with our very, I would call it, fragile economy. So I think it's very interesting to challenge Biden to that, but this would really, I guess, more be a request for the people behind the scenes telling Biden what to do. What do you think?
Well, listen, his the rep of Joe Biden prior to this was that he could make deals across the aisle. That was his big strength. He can make deals. He can talk to the other side. He ran as more of a centrist Democrat, and now he's been bullied by the far left of the Democratic Party because they're louder. They are pushing him to do things that I don't really believe he wants to do. But to your point, he isn't taking the strong stand to say, listen, we can't do this. We need to move more to the center.
Right.
We need to embrace ideas from the other side. We need to look at how things are going and how the country has been going for the last couple of years, and we need to change it. And yes, those, you may have fine ideas way over there at the far left, but
yeah, but
it's never going to happen.
As you're saying this, I keep thinking of the way in which the Democratic Party is now attacking Manchin. They're going after a person who didn't want to support a Build Back Better initiative that absolutely could be described as a bunch of wish list. Wish list items on the Democratic side of the aisle that had really nothing to do with what was originally supposed to be kind of extended infrastructure thing.
Right.
It just went nuts and out of hand. Got whittled down, and then eventually Manchin said, you know what, this is not the time for this, and he's right in saying that, and he is being attacked from all sides now, so much so that Republicans, even ones that are not terribly liked, like Mitch McConnell, are asking him to switch sides. So can you see? Go ahead.
Yes, the Democratic Party's a dumpster fire.
It is.
There's no two ways about it. They can't get their stuff together to realize, hey, we've got a moment where we're in charge. Let's work. Let's work and actually be in charge and get some things done.
And the reason
wins, if they got some wins, then you can push for things that
exactly. And the reason I keep saying they cannot unite to get those initial wins while they're still in charge, which I don't think will be for much longer, is because they don't have a valuable leader at the top pushing the party his direction. Say what you will about the former President Donald Trump. He seems to lead the conversation for a lot of Republicans and steer a lot of Republicans to the things he finds important. Biden certainly doesn't do that. All right, we got to take a break. A lot more coming up. Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show, and Brian Noonan hanging out with me for the holiday. More after this.
The Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
Craig Collins filling in. Thrilled to have you just before the holidays. Chad will be back, and hopefully he's, as I keep saying, staying away from news because it's going to make him a happy person, at least in my opinion. Brian Noonan hanging out with me, and I'm forcing him to talk about the news of the day too, radio host. And, I just figured it's just about time for the holiday. I should not be doing the whole thing by myself. I need to bring in a friend.
Yeah, why do all the heavy lifting?
Right,
Craig?
yeah, seriously. I'm just going to have you talk, and I'm just going to take a nap for a bit here. First, I want to talk quickly. I don't know if you've seen this before. The Chinese brain control stuff that they're doing. Have you heard this? China is actually researching a way to potentially utilize, quote-unquote, brain control as a warfare weapon. This is something that we have even answered questions about, our Pentagon spokesperson, and talked about how we can't validate any one report, but we are aware of kind of a more generalized version of this conversation. So it added credibility to it. Now, apparently, some additional Commerce Department sanctions and other things happening on Chinese technology continue to reference some sort of advancement in the world of, and I'll say it again, brain control warfare technology being studied in China. I know it's time for the holidays, and we should probably talk about lighter things. How do you react to this, Noonan, as it keeps getting more and more potentially real?
Well, I'm very excited that the Manchurian Candidate is now becoming a fact instead of fiction. That's terrifying, but
right.
It doesn't surprise me with the advent of all the technology. that we are now looking at how we can get inside a person's brain and program them to do whatever you want, because the military, and I don't care whether it's a Chinese military, American military, it's all about molding soldiers to do what you want them to do without questioning.
Sure.
This will take out any sort of human free choice, which is terrifying.
Yeah. No,
it will make you super soldiers, basically, who will do whatever you program them to do.
Man, I hate the fact that in saying that you sort of referenced a Marvel movie, and I really like the Captain America version of a super soldier. I would not enjoy these. One of the things I guess they would more realistically gain sooner in the future than full, put a chip in a guy's brain, do whatever you tell him to do, is a version of just paralyzing the enemy on the battlefield. So essentially having some sort of technology that would make you incapable of fighting, or maybe, as we already have in the world of technology, trying to kind of turn all the electronics off, turn all the weapons off, and then turn all the people off. It's odd to me to think about that country specifically being that interested in something that would have such a detrimental impact on people trying to fight them. You know what I mean?
So this is more for the enemy. This is mind control of the enemy as opposed to mind control of their own troops.
Yeah, as is quoted in one of the advanced reports on this that I've found, and I trust this as much as you want because I don't think this is American intelligence. War has started to shift from the pursuit of destroying bodies to simply paralyzing and or controlling the opponent. And as I said, I think both are the goal at the end, but the more realistic, and this is weird to say it this way, of the two to be, something they could achieve in the near-ish future would be paralyzing you through technology.
Well, that's terrifying then, because once it leaves the military, it's coming to a theater near you,
right,
or the supermarket near you, or wherever. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Shifting gears to something that's certainly not any happier or any more positive in time for the holidays. But
this is a very uplifting holiday program.
That's what I'm trying to do. Eventually, we'll get to sillier things. We'll do resolutions at some point. But I have to talk about this. This is certainly big news in the last 24 hours. Ghislane Maxwell was found guilty of 5 of the 6 charges against her. I think she faces something like 60 years in prison when sentencing finally occurs. Now, what I enjoyed, and I guess I shouldn't even call them hot takes, because certainly a lot of people will agree. I agree with the opinions shared by Judge Pirro and by Joey Jones on Fox News. But the ability to so strongly call this person, Ghislane, to call her an evil, horrible person based on everything we learned in this courtroom is, very simple for so many. Here's a couple examples.
Well, my first thoughts have to do with the victims in this case and the survivors, I should call them. That this is testifying in a criminal case and then having a jury believe you is one of the most healthy, therapeutic, and cathartic things that can happen to a victim of a sex crime, especially the women who have tried to find justice for decades against these animals, because that's what they are. They are animals. When you're a predator and you're a pedophile and you're enticing young women, or at least entering into a conspiracy to transport them and to commit sex trafficking of minors, then you are no better than an animal.
Go Judge Janine. I will say that first and foremost. Second, I actually want to, and this is also like a serious topic to touch on, but I can't help it, quickly go back to something she said at the very beginning of that for someone of this type of crime, for a victim of this type of thing, since usually there's not quite as much or any in a lot of examples, hard evidence to prove what you're saying in a courtroom is true, it does become this is my story and I need the jury to believe me because I'm simply telling the truth. And I'd never really thought of it quite that way, that when the conviction comes down for anyone that would have testified, any witnesses, any people that were harmed by those accused of crimes like this, would feel some sort of catharsis in that moment, some sort of personal victory of not just actually having the person be held accountable for the terrible things that they did, but having other people believe you, since, as I said, it's usually not something you can prove the same way you prove, say, a murder charge.
No, that's exactly right. We hear stories all the time about victims who are forced to testify. They're ripped apart by defense attorneys. So to have the person that has traumatized you and harmed you, held accountable, and found guilty, there has to be something. Does it erase all the pain? Absolutely not. But it does vindicate you a little bit. And your point of someone believes me, that's gotta be, we all have those to a much smaller degree, those points in our life where we're telling the truth and somebody doesn't believe us. And then when someone finally does, you're like, thank goodness.
No, absolutely. You're right.
Listening.
It feels wrong to compare, but at the same time, you're absolutely right. No. And I know you're not. At the same time, I thought of, examples in my own life where something happens and it could be something that's not anywhere near as big of a deal, but still important to you. And you want to tell somebody else the story of it, and they may or may not believe you. And so then obviously with all of the, heightened issues or emotional, feelings you'd have being a victim of something like this, it does make sense for sure. To think that at the end of all of it, you just feel relieved. And yeah, as you said, and actually I can play this other piece of audio from Joey Jones and Fox News. It's not like it fixes everything that would be going through that pain, going through that kind of an experience. And he touches on that too.
Yeah, these crimes committed never go away for the victims. They never have gone away. They didn't get shelved for 20 years and come back when this trial came. It's been a part of their life every single day. And so I don't know how victims that weren't part of this trial feel. I don't know if they feel vindicated or if they feel left out because the actual crime committed against them hasn't gone to trial. But I will tell you this, this is never going to go away for her now either. It is the rest of her life. It's prison. With any luck, I hope she rots in jail and then she can rot in hell after that. Evil doesn't have a definitive face, but you're seeing it on our screen right now.
Evil doesn't have a definitive face, but you're seeing it on your screen right now. I know, again, I'm of the mind to call that a hot take when it's really not, but that is something else as far as a way to indict someone responsible for some terrible, terrible things. We're going to go ahead and take a break in just a little bit. After the break, we're going to talk about another couple stories out there in the news that are much, much more fun. And also, Noonan, if you're up for it, I think I'm going to read some horoscopes on the show because apparently, and this might be weird, a lot of horoscopes for 2022 overwhelmingly positive. Do you think that this is just everyone being aware that I can take no bad news to start 2022, and if I believe,
even the stars are saying, they can't take much more.
Right.
Let's align and give them some false hope.
Exactly.
And they can read it on a placemat at a Chinese restaurant and feel good about themselves.
Even if I believe or don't really believe in these, it might feel good to read one that says everything's going to be better next year. You're going to get all the professional and romantic success you're looking for, and maybe also star in a blockbuster movie. That coming up and a lot more. Craig Collins filling in along with Brian Noonan on the Chad Benson Show.
Running with scissors sounds great compared to this.
Say what?
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in, and since it's a holiday, I brought along a friend, radio host, podcaster, comedian. What else do you do, Brian Noonan?
I do the dishes. I do windows. I do a lot of things. I'm multifaceted. I'm a quadruple threat.
Yeah, your lawn care service has really been taking off in the last few years.
For sure. Now I do driveway shoveling snow for people who are affected by that. Anything you need.
Real quick, even though I don't even promote my own social media as much as I should, the Craig Collins Show on Facebook, by the way, Instagram, a whole bunch of things. Where can people find more of you?
Brian Noonan Show on Facebook and Twitter, and Realities May Vary is the podcast.
There you go. All right. A couple quick things. First, and I just found out off the air, much to my dismay, that both you and producer Phil are not huge fans of Fast and Furious, although I should have known in asking Phil, since he has those hard and fast, not that I meant that as a pun, movie rules. But you surprised me as not a Fast and Furious guy, Noonan. I figured you'd be in on these movies like I am.
Well, first of all, I love to drive fast, and I'm always furious behind the wheel. But no, I like The Rock.
Sure.
I have nothing against The Rock. I just never got into these movies. I know there's a Tokyo Drift.
That's the worst one, by the way. Every time you think that's the worst one.
Okay. Continue. I know they went to space in the last one. I'm not sure how The Rock became I just call him Rock because we're that close.
I know.
Off the. I'm not sure how he got involved in the franchise. I know he and Vin Diesel do not like each other.
Well, and that's why I bring this up. Just the other day, The Rock did yet another interview where he talked about the problems between him and Vin Diesel, and essentially said he is never coming back to the Fast and Furious film franchise outside of maybe doing more of his own spin-off movies. Tremendously disappointing for someone like me. And I think, and this is just, I want to offer it out there, I will be the moderator if Vin Diesel, and I think I could call him Rock now too. I'm going to try.
Sure, why not?
Okay.
Yeah.
And The Rock are willing to come around and have a chat. I feel like I can work us all through this at some point because you need The Rock in the Fast and Furious movies. They're just better with him.
He's a law enforcement officer? Is that his role?
Well, now he's part of the rogue group of people that are, talented drivers of vehicles who also save the world occasionally. I think that's how I describe them. And I'm just, again, I guess it's just me alone sitting here being sad. Although, this was something that Phil did mention too, and it reminded us both about it and made us all happy. Cobra Kai's coming back, so I can't be that sad.
Don't be sad that Cobra Kai is coming back. Be happy. But one last thing, just The Rock won. Just forget Vin Diesel. Don't talk about him anymore. But yes, can we all agree that Ralph Macchio's character on Cobra Kai has turned out to be the jerk of the show? And that Johnny we all empathize with Johnny because he's a loser.
You know what I dislike about what I'm about to do here is I don't think I'm going to win any points with anyone, but I'm going to do it anyway. This was a theory espoused in How I Met Your Mother, that the actual superhero of the original Karate Kid movie was not, in fact, Ralph Macchio. It was Johnny. And so now that the TV show kind of went the same direction, I feel like both the writers of How I Met Your Mother and just a lot of people who were entertained by that idea are tremendously thrilled. But yeah, absolutely. It's been interesting to see the evolution there. I will say the last season, maybe not quite as good as the first couple. Yeah.
I'm invested still. I'm looking forward to the new season. And yet there were times when I was about to bow out because it was getting way too much. Did I like that Elizabeth Shue came back? You bet I did.
Yeah.
She is eye candy. Very talented. I've missed Elizabeth Shue.
Okay.
But now I'm looking forward to the crazy villain from Karate Kid 3 is coming back. I don't know how he's going to fit in. Johnny's or Ralph Macchio and Johnny have teamed up with their new dojo, and they've got Hawk is coming to Hawk is evolving into a good guy.
Do you think we eventually have Jaden Smith on this show too, by the way? I don't know if that's sacrilegious to ask, but that was the latest Karate Kid movie.
Wow. The Karate Kid multiverse. Right. This could be something.
I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to ruin it.
Right now, we're going to send it to ourselves.
Yeah, there you go.
It's copyright.
I don't want to say anything else because I don't want to ruin it, but if you haven't seen the Spider-Man movie and you're a fan of those types of things, go see it. It's great. A couple other quick stories. One, a man secretly wrote a message to other guys that might date a girl he went on a one-off dating app date with. And I found it humorous. Several people on social media thought it was appalling behavior. So I will ask the most sensible person I know. No, wait, they're not available. I will ask Brian Noonan instead. No, I'm kidding. So the guy, I guess, goes on this date with 21-year-old Luna. They have what both of them seem to agree is not a great time. It wasn't the, romantic thing either of them expected it to be. However, and this is my biggest point of confusion, the guy still ended up in her apartment. She's saying she wasn't enjoying her time with him. Somehow she still invited him over. Eventually she asked him to leave because she said she was, quote, not feeling it, but that she was very nice about asking him to get out of her house. And he said, no problem. Let me just hit the restroom real quick. Stole a lipstick from her medicine cabinet and wrote run on the bottom of her toilet seat. And then when asked about it, he told her that he assumed she'd never find it because he didn't think women looked there. What say you, Noonan, about that whole move?
Well, first of all, I applaud this guy 100%. One, when he was asked to leave, he said, yes, I will leave. He did the gentlemanly thing. He did have to avail himself of her water closet, which was fine. And I think it was ingenious. Now, his thought that a woman doesn't see the underside of her toilet seat, that's just thinking that Luna doesn't clean her bathroom,
right?
Which
wrong,
is probably wrong.
Yeah,
but she is named Luna, so I'm guessing she's a little out there. That's just I know that's a bias against women named Luna or any sort of astrological name, and I apologize if that is your name.
Oh, you know what? Crazy. We're going to run out of time, so I might as well do this before we got to take another break. What astrological sign are you?
I'm Aries.
All right. I read in the New York Post, I don't know why they have a story about this, but they have stories about a lot of things, that everyone's horoscope is tremendously positive for 2022, which it should be. Really, if the stars are telling me it's going to be a bad year, I just pack it in at that point. But here is yours, Noonan. The year 2022 will bring you a major chance to heal and envision how you'd like your life to grow in the decade to come ahead. You're not just getting a great next year. Apparently, you're going to get a great decade.
But I'm running out of time. We got to move this along.
You'll find that you are being divinely guided by a loving universe as you reflect in the past, learn the lessons you've needed, and prepare for the bright new chapter that's about to begin in your life. May until October will be the most magnificent period of the year for you as you are ready for the great rebirth. Are you going to rebirth in 2022?
I am the phoenix of radio. I will rise from the ashes that my life has become.
Sure.
And look forward to me from May to October, because once Thanksgiving comes next year, I'm back in the garbage heap.
Yeah, honestly, yeah.
I am going to have a run of 7 months that you will not believe.
Right. You were just going to fly slightly too close to the sun like Icarus. So by the time November comes, apparently, back to turmoil, you'll be extremely lucky in every way. So seize the day and create the life you've always wanted.
Wow.
I know.
I cannot wait to carpe the diem.
This is legitimately your horoscope. Well, there will certainly be professional growth in 2022, especially in the first few months. You're going to have just across the board amazing year. Congratulations, Noonan. Quick break, a lot more.
Year.
Greg Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show. Brian Noonan, thanks for helping out.
This is the Chad Benson Show. Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. As I said, in honor of the holidays, I'm going to keep spending part of the time here with you with some of my radio friends. Now I bring in Rich Lenkov, legal expert, host of Legal Face Off, a podcast on the WGN Radio Podcast Network. Welcome to the show, Rich.
Craig, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be back.
Thrilled to have you on. Obviously, the first thing we're going to talk about, the biggest legal news of the last 24 hours, is Ghislane Maxwell being found guilty of 5 of the 6 charges. Several interesting aspects in this case, and certainly powerful testimony being given by the victims. But I have to ask you first, if you don't mind, why only 5? Do you know what it would be from a legal standpoint that would be the reason the jury didn't find her guilty of that second charge?
Yeah, it's a sign that, it's a great question, because whenever you have a jury that doesn't convict on all counts, it's always interesting, because it really shows, I think, that the jury is doing their job, right? That they didn't just spend a few minutes and give a blanket conviction.
Yeah.
In this case, they took 40 hours over the course of almost a week to deliberate.
Well, and even to touch on that point for just a second, Rich, I know that the judge at one point said that they might have been facing a mistrial due to the Omicron variant of COVID if the jury had taken too much longer, which was sort of surreal to try to, process if that could even actually occur. And obviously, thankfully, did not. But as you said, the jury took a long time to deliberate before coming to this verdict.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting, and you raise a great point that who knows what would have happened if Omicron struck one of the jurors. It did affect one of the attorneys involved, and that delayed things. The other interesting component is that, as a trial lawyer myself, you never want to have, at least as a defense attorney, you never want to have a trial around Christmas. The conventional wisdom is that, jurors would feel sympathetic to a plaintiff, in this case, in a criminal case, to the defendant, and go light on them. Well, certainly in this case, that didn't have an effect.
No.
You're right. They didn't convict her on the one count of enticing a minor to travel to engage in illegal sex acts, but certainly they didn't feel any Christmas cheer towards this criminal defendant.
So let's talk about what's next then. Obviously, she will be sentenced. I've read that it could be up to 60 years that she could face in prison. Do you think that she would get a maximum sentence? Do you think that she would get lighter sentencing? I know that this is someone who's never been, I believe, convicted of a crime before, but certainly someone in a high-profile, years-long type of criminal activity.
Yeah, you're right. She doesn't have a criminal background, so that will play a factor into not giving her the maximum sentence of 65 years. On the other hand, this is a high-profile case, and prosecutors want to, and the judge probably wants to send a message. And, you hear about the sending a message all the time, and sometimes it's not relevant. I mean, is it relevant in the Jussie Smollett case? How likely is it that another criminal defendant will go out at 2 a.m. in Chicago and fake his own racial attack? Probably unlikely. So in that case, it's unlikely that sending a message would be a huge factor. In this case, however, in a high-profile, billionaire and his accomplice in sexually assaulting young women, there is a message to be sent, right? The message is that no matter how rich and powerful you are, no matter how high-profile your friends are, you're not going to get away with it. So in this case, I do expect the judge to impose a very harsh sentence, if not the maximum of 65 years.
All right. Now, one of the things everyone does discuss quite a bit, and certainly throughout the entirety of the trial or even the time before the trial, was the names that this person may know that Maxwell may eventually offer up. I imagine in a trade of some kind for a reduced sentence. If it is the closest to maximum possible, is there any incentive to push even further that direction to try to entice this person to talk more about those high profile people like Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, and even former President Trump that may or may not somehow at least be potentially named names by her?
Yeah, it's a great question. For sure, there will be pressure on the feds will apply now more pressure on her to talk. There's bigger, even though she's a big name and you can't prosecute Epstein anymore, there are bigger names out there. Prince Andrew has been facing a civil lawsuit over his alleged involvement in the Epstein affair. He has denied it, of course, and interestingly, his name didn't really come up during this criminal trial, mostly because Maxwell didn't testify, but for sure, right? I mean, prosecutors will likely offer her a more lenient sentence if she flips on higher profile people like Clinton, like Trump, like Prince Andrew, because those are, very big fish, obviously, and prosecutors, we have them on our podcast all the time, U.S. attorneys, they want big fish, not just because of the notoriety it brings and, the attention, but to our earlier point, it does send a message. I mean, what better message can you send than two former presidents who will be criminally prosecuted, possibly, if she flips on them? So,
and we should mention
end of the story.
Absolutely, and we should mention that there's no information that we have that we're not sharing that makes us aware of the likelihood of any of those names actually being found guilty of anything. I do want to say that, but there's certainly the names that have been most mentioned involved in this trial, at least the high-profile ones. Two other quick things, and then I want to move on to something just very different in honor of, I guess, or because of the fact that the year is just about over. But two other quick things about this trial. The first one, and I feel like I'd been talking to you about this recently often, of people taking the stand to defend themselves. She didn't do that. Do you have any guess as to why, other than she knew it would just make her more and more guilty?
Yeah, I think when you look at I don't know how many photos, it seems like there was, at least 50 photos shown of her and Epstein, cavorting around and having the time of their lives. I think that sends a message to us why she didn't testify. What possible benefit could there be? I mean, her defense was that the accusers were out for money, that they weren't credible. That's already a very risky ploy. Not unexpected, but very risky to attack the victims. So if she got up there and further testified about that, it would have been very dangerous. I mean, the fact that we've heard testimony from the likes of Rittenhouse and, Elizabeth Holmes and other high-profile defendants lately doesn't mean that that's the standard. The standard generally is that you don't put your client on in a criminal case because you're more likely to do harm than good. And the Jussie Smollett case is a great example of that, right? That's the best example recently of keep your mouth shut. You're only going to hurt yourself. So
yeah, absolutely. And then just one other quick thing, and I don't know how relevant this would be. I know that she has been, imprisoned already, so it's not like she would be new to being incarcerated again. But would there be a fear of her not staying alive? Would she be monitored for some kind of suicide watch? Would there be an assumption, like many who feel that Epstein may not have been the one that ended the life of Jeffrey Epstein? Do you think that any of that will come into play as far as where she inevitably serves her time?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, she's 60. She couldn't be found, as we talked about earlier. She can be sentenced to 65 years maximum. So, if faced with the prospect of basically dying in a federal prison, you're definitely going to be on suicide watch. And especially given this kind of crime, and especially given the history with her co-conspirator, Jeffrey Epstein. So I think that's a good point.
Fair enough. So let's just move on to what feels like a year of high-profile trials. I was saying this just the other day, that it seems like, for some reason, several of these have captured national attention. And I don't know if I'm just wrong, and it's usually this many that wind up in our collective kind of consciousness. But apparently, there are several that you could mention here. What have been some of the top legal stories of this year?
Well, we put together a list, Craig, and I don't know how much time you have, but I can roll through them very quickly. And
we can take a few minutes for them.
Well, the Maxwell case, actually, ironically, even before the verdict came down, was our 10th story. That's obviously a high-profile trial. The 9th story that we covered legally is vaccine mandate lawsuits. Those have been, obviously a huge story over the last 2 years and continue to be a story going on in 2022. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, because of some of the differences in some of the medical opinions connected to the Omicron variant, do you see a lot more vaccine mandate lawsuits in 2022?
We do, and actually, this story will be going to, or the Supreme Court will be weighing multiple lawsuits against the federal vaccine mandate in 2022. So they've agreed to consider this for the first time. So we'll have, hopefully, a definitive answer on this issue early in 2022.
Sure. So violent crime has certainly been a big issue, and I saw that it was number 8 on the list. Legal face-off, I will mention, is in Chicago, and Chicago is certainly one of the places that's seen a lot of this. Obviously, places like San Francisco with the smash-and-grab crimes, too. But why did this one make the list?
Yeah, again, nationally, we don't know if some blame the pandemic, some blame, some other issues, but violent crime across the country, here locally in Chicago, where I am, we're seeing record numbers, not just of homicides, but smash and grabs, as you mentioned, carjackings. We just came off a very violent weekend, predictably, over the holiday weekend in Chicago, so that continues to be a huge story. And it has a lot of effects in other areas, right? I mean, it's affecting the mayoral situation here in Chicago. It obviously affects California. Gavin Newsom was subject to a recall lawsuit, so mostly because of crime. So it's a huge story.
You know what, actually, I want to ask you one other thing about that, and then if you can hang on, we'll take a break after this question, and we'll come back and we'll do the rest of your top 10 list of the biggest legal stories of 2021 if you have a little more time. But just about the violent crime story, what I'm seeing in a lot of these is that it's typically young people, whether it's a smash and grab or a carjacking, which you mentioned. It's a lot of even, minors who are committing these kind of things. Is that something you're seeing a large trend on? And just as a legal expert, would you have an opinion as to why it would be more predominant in a year like this or in the last couple of years that we've experienced for a younger person to be like, you know what, screw it, I guess. I'm going to go ahead and do something like try to, carjack or I guess just smash and grab at a jewelry store?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think it's what we're seeing differently now from a lot of other years is really two things. Number one, at least here locally in Chicago, is the fact that many more young people are involved, and we've seen high-profile cases here in Chicago of 13, 14-year-olds being involved in some of these crimes, which is pretty shocking. The second thing is the rise in violence across the city here in Chicago. It's not just centered on certain neighborhoods, but unprecedentedly, we're seeing in neighborhoods that were otherwise fairly safe on the north side, predominantly these crimes happening. So it's not just being done by younger offenders, but they're traveling all across the city to do this.
Interesting. Rich Lenkov is the co-host of Legal Face-Off, a substantially successful podcast, I will say, certainly one of the preeminent ones in the United States on the world of both legal news, serious and I think fun, which is there as possible. We're going to take a quick break. After that, a lot more with Rich as we go through the rest of his list of the biggest legal stories of this past year. Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show.
You go, boy.
This isn't about right or left. This is just about right and wrong.
Right you are, Chad. The Chad Benson Show.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in, and very kindly, legal expert, lawyer, professional lawyer, Rich Lenkov, host of Legal Face-Off, a podcast on the WGN Radio Podcast Network, has hung in to give us the rest of your top 10 legal news stories of 2021. And there have been so many. I think we're at number 7. What was number 7 on your list, Rich?
Yeah, the Kimberly Potter trial in Minneapolis. This is the police officer who was convicted for using her gun instead of a taser. Another high-profile case that was decided in this past year.
Certainly, absolutely. And then we're at the top 5. I feel like I need a drum roll or Casey Kasem audio or something, but what was number 5 on the list?
It's a very unfortunate, drum roll, because all these cases, they're all interesting cases for sure.
Fair enough.
I think, honestly, in any regular year, any one of these top 5 could have been number 1 by far. It's surprising that Jussie Smollett is number 5, right, given how high-profile a case that was. But that comes in at number 5. Obviously got worldwide attention and has gone on now for 2 years. And the interesting part of all these stories, Craig, is that almost all of them, again, will continue to be a story in 2022. Why is Smollett still a story? Well, number 1, he's yet to be sentenced. And number 2, we're going to see how it affects Kim Foxx, the Cook County State's attorney who was panned by the special prosecutor, Dan Webb, for how she handled the entire case. So we'll see how this develops in the next year.
Absolutely. And I would actually argue a little bit to kind of validate your list even further from your show that Smollett feels a little smaller than maybe he should as a legal story, because it took so many years to get him into a courtroom in the first place to try him on what most of society believed was absolutely a lie long before he was convicted of lying to the police. The top 4. Let's go with number 4.
The abortion case, but most specifically the Mississippi case that was argued before the Supreme Court a few weeks ago. Why is that so significant? Well, there's 50 years of precedent that has upheld Roe v. Wade, and this is really the most aggressive attack against that precedent that we've ever seen. And I think it's very likely that the Supreme Court, given the 6-3 majority, conservative majority, will overturn Roe v. Wade, throwing the issue back to the states in June of 22. So that's obviously going to be a huge legal story when the Supreme Court weighs in June.
Yeah, wow. So then there are 3 still bigger than that, because as you said, it's probably going to wind up being a much bigger story when it occurs next year. But what's number 3?
Well, the Derek Chauvin trial, of course, in the wake of the George Floyd murder. He was convicted of murder. Again, it's rare that a police officer is even charged. We talked about Kim Potter earlier, let alone convicted in a shooting death or in a death of anyone like the George Floyd case. So his testimony and, or not his testimony, but his trial and the verdict and what we did hear from him, and the fact that he just pled guilty a couple of weeks ago to the federal charge obviously makes that a huge story in 2021.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We only have about 30 seconds left. The number 2 on your list I saw was insurrection, and certainly that's been a topic of conversation no matter what side of the political aisle you feel that story deserves to be on. And then number 1, probably the least shocking. What is the number 1?
The Kyle Rittenhouse trial, right? I mean, among all the high-profile cases, this might have been the most high-profile just because it was televised and we actually heard from the defendant. So that makes number 1 on our list.
Absolutely. We're going to run out of time, so I cannot give you your horoscope. I did read that they're all tremendously positive this year, and you told me you were a Leo. Great news for both your personal and professional career, by the way, in your horoscope as well, Rich, so don't worry. Legal Face-Off is the podcast. Thanks, as always, for hanging out with us. I got to get out of here, though. Chad Benson Show, Craig Collins filling in. Quick break, a lot more in a bit.
Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins, filling in. Thrilled to be here with the holiday so very, very close to us. And hopefully you're spending it with your loved ones, your friends, your family, and you're not at all listening to those of you to tell you not to do that, especially as, and this is just a quick mention, we are seeing an incredible increase in the amount of cases of COVID, positive confirmed cases of COVID-19, and of course the Omicron variant specifically. And yet the amount of hospitalization is nowhere near as high in jumping upward. I think it's up about 11% throughout the country. And then actually the amount of death is down. And I know that a lot of medical experts will tell you that those two numbers lag behind the first one. But there is a tremendous amount of expectation that it won't be anything like what it was before, I guess, vaccines or just before all the different things have changed in the world of COVID. And the latest variant is certainly much more mild, about 80% less likely to cause severe illness of any kind. And that is to anyone, not just to the vaccinated. So several reasons to feel as though the big, scary first number, the amount of cases, isn't anywhere near as impactful or shouldn't be acted on by our politicians as much as they were in the past. Honestly, there's a lot of experts saying that might be a barometer we just start ignoring completely and look more toward the amount of hospitalization, et cetera, to decide how serious an outbreak is anywhere in our country. Anyway, let's move on from that topic of conversation. Let's move to what I think is very good advice for President Biden. This comes from Professor Brian Brenberg. He is talking about some of the ways in which maybe getting this administration back on track could occur. I don't know that many of us can envision this for real. And it's not just because you might be politically to one side or the other. It's just because the advice I'm about to play for you, the thing that he is most suggesting our current president consider, seems impossible within the Democratic Party. And I guess tipping the hat just a little as to what he's about to say, Joe Manchin probably would agree that this is a difficult thing to do, even if Joe has done a great job of doing it.
At this point, what the president really needs to do in 2022 is make a sharp break with the left. He has to start saying and doing things that are uncomfortable to his left-wing base. He has to say, we need to get workers back on the job. We're going to drop all of these mandates. We've got to keep schools open. We're going to take that off of the table. He needs to set the stage for businesses to hire and people to work. It's as simple as that. If he does that, we can make progress on inflation faster. If he doesn't do that, Jackie, we're going to have this conversation for a really long time.
Now, what's so interesting about the idea, and honestly, a lot of the conversations we can have in the world of the changes as far as the CDC guidelines go for quarantine, or just any of these conversations about how the world of business is now being much more heavily involved in any of these kind of conversations we're having about how to react to the public health issues we face in our society, for lack of saying it a better way. And so what I think is so valuable in that piece of advice is getting people back to work, is making sure businesses can operate effectively. I mean, you just have to look at the airline industry as one example of something that is so tremendously challenged. And now more and more we believe, and certainly they had been mentioning COVID as the cause for a while, but by the amount of quarantine time that so many people who test positive in that industry have had to face, you're seeing the same things in some of our core and most necessary services in our country. Things like firefighters, police officers dealing with the same sort of challenges. And the 5-day quarantine guideline change obviously keeps those aspects of our society functioning as best as possible, to say the very least. But it's so tremendously important if we believe that this Omicron variant is as infectious as it is, and it's obviously proving to be so far. Although, again, I hate to continue to mention this. I don't hate to mention it. The CDC kind of oddly changed their projection for the percentage of cases that were Omicron in the middle of December from something over 70% to something around 20 or so percent, which is just a surreal shift in the numbers there. But now we believe that the most prevalent variant in this country is Omicron, and that it will spread like wildfire for the next few months. And you just can't sustain having that many things shut down, that many people out of work for that long. And so it is nice to finally hear the breakthrough in that way. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I'm sure any small business owner who lost their company, lost their livelihood over the last year and a half wishes we had this conversation much sooner than having it now. But what also surprises me a lot, and maybe even entertains me a tad, is the way that some on CNN have been handling some of the changes happening in the world of whether it's testing or different mandates that could be in place. Certainly some of the now new to them, certainly not new for others, doubt or questioning of authorities, whether it's Dr. Fauci or others that have been telling you very different ways to live your life for so long. And here is one example. First, Allison Camerata does reference the change in D.C., which, by the way, is tremendously confusing, I imagine, to several people. If we have a high-profile lack of tests for those who need them in our country right now, how could you possibly require tests for people to return to classrooms? But Allison first mentions that before transitioning to a question for her guest that I thought was very much proving the point that so many more are now in the same camp we've been in for a bit.
Okay, so this just in, Washington, D.C.'s mayor just announced that all students and staff must show proof of a negative test before returning to school on January 5th. That's the first time that we're hearing that kind of mandate in Washington.
I just love how she's pausing even as she's going through that part of it. But to continue.
Let's start with testing, okay? Because as you know, so many people are desperate for reliable at-home tests. And that's why I need your help understanding what Dr. Fauci said about these at-home tests yesterday.
Okay, hold on. Before I play any of the rest of this, and she is setting up a question for her medical expert guest who's on with her, and she's going to play Fauci audio. But just even that, I need your help in understanding what Dr. Fauci said. I feel like so many people have spoken that phrase at one point or another throughout the entirety of this pandemic. And it's just kind of nice to hear it on the places that pretended it was ludicrous to ever ask a question that started off like that. But here is the Fauci audio and then the follow-up question.
The tests are still worthwhile. Don't let anybody think that the FDA was saying the tests are no longer good. They say they're less sensitive now. They never were 100% sensitive. Some of the tests have a diminution further of the sensitivity, but they still say the tests are useful and should be used.
Look, some people will say that Dr. Fauci is just a smart man who uses fancier words when he describes things. Some people will say that they're medical terms that get thrown out there. But if you're someone who's as seasoned as this man is in being on cameras and communicating science to the people because you are the living embodiment of science, using words that are strategically vague, in my opinion, is still a demonstration of your desire to not just be a trusted science communicator, but be someone who is working with agenda in mind. And Allison Camerata of CNN seems to understand, like I do, the oddness in the way he phrased that answer.
Okay. A diminution of the sensitivity. Does that mean that the at-home rapid tests work to detect Omicron or not?
I'm sorry, that's it. I won't play the rest of the audio. You don't need all of it. Certainly, it's not like I agree with many of the things that Camerata is now saying or doing, or that station is saying or doing. But it's just something else to hear it, to see it happen, and to feel as I do, just tremendously good about the idea that we're getting to this place. And honestly, I wonder, and this is just me, if we see Omicron do what we expect it to do to the vaccinated. And what I mean by that is be as good at breaking through and causing infection, creating a scenario where the vaccinated would transmit the virus to others. All of these are things that we absolutely already assume will occur. But when we get to the part of our journey here, I guess is what I'm going to call it, in the COVID pandemic, endemic, whatever it's becoming. I wonder if eventually all of these things will fall to the side, because essentially the question will become, and I guess, you know what? I had someone reach out to me on social media after I said a very similar thing yesterday, and someone said to me that you're completely discounting the idea that we go back to shutdown, that everything gets locked back down, that every single mask mandate comes back into effect everywhere in the country. I just can't envision us going through that again, especially if we're considering the idea that not only is this variant incredibly infectious, it's incredibly mild comparatively. So I am discounting the idea that the response to the place I expect us to be in a month or 2 months doesn't involve shutdown, doesn't involve anything more extreme than that. But I guess it is out there as the alternative. I think that we'll eventually get to that place that a lot of us have wanted to be at for a while. And what I mean by that is a world where it doesn't really matter. And I'm not trying to discount the seriousness of COVID. I'm vaccinated. I'm not trying to be anti-vax either. But we're just not going to test anyone, really. We're going to maybe much more rely. And I also am not trying to say that to try to excuse this administration from having a lack of testing available. But it just doesn't seem to be a valuable component to understanding where we're at as far as the seriousness of the problem. And so I think it'll just become hospitalization and, death numbers that you'll see reported on over the next few months, much more than cases. And I think most of our society, most of our leaders will have to accept the reality that you just can't prevent it in that sense. If vaccines don't prevent it, if nothing else prevents spread, and if no one is going to the hospital in the numbers that some may fear, then we finally live our lives. And one last thing, I guess, one last piece of hope, as it's almost time for the new year in response to this idea, is that there's a brand new study out there saying that if you do get Omicron, and I'm not telling you to go get COVID, by the way, but if you do get Omicron and you get over it, which, as I've said several times now, is tremendously likely, much more so than even the 90-something% that the other versions of COVID, you were likely to get over it. But you would have valuable protection against other variants, including Delta. So if someone who has never been vaccinated gets Omicron, which I think every scientific person out there thinks will happen for almost all of us in this country, and I hate that I'm belaboring this point so many times and in such fine detail, but it just bears being said in these simple terms, then eventually they will be immune like any of the vaccinated are immune. So then, and as that is coming rapidly, what do we do as far as our way of governing and the way in which we provide advice from the medical, the scientific communities? I imagine the answer finally will be nothing. You just eventually live in the world that it sounds like we're barreling toward, whether we want it or not. And many of us do actually want that world where this is hopefully finally in the background of our lives, not just in how we live our lives, but the things you hear about every single day. All right, and on that note, quick break, a lot more. Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show.
Set Chad straight. Text the show, 323-538-2423. That's 323-538-CHAD. Someone has to do it. Might as well be you. The Chad Benson Show.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. It's something that I don't want to explain in more detail. It's not because I'm ashamed of it. It's just odd to try to explain. I've been talking about Oreos a lot on the radio in the last week or so. I don't know why they seem to keep coming up. I don't think I've forced it on a lot of the people here because I don't know how Chad would feel about me just talking about Oreos all the time on his very fancy radio program. But I saw that Dionne Warwick is now in a fight with Oreos. So I feel like now it's hit the level of news that I can bring it to you on this show. Dionne Warwick apparently was complaining to the company about all the crazy flavors of Oreos. And then they decided not only to respond to some of her social media complaints by, eye-rolling her, I guess, there. They also sent her a bunch of the wacky flavors of Oreo cookies, like the Java chip-flavored ones. along with, and I guess I misunderstood this when I first saw the story, so I'm glad to correct it now, Oreo-flavored lip balm, not Oreos that taste like lip balm, which would be a terrible product. But Dion responded by both laughing at these gifts sent to her on social media and threatening further action. So the singing legend is going to hopefully at some point in 2022 continue to take down the wackiness of the oddly flavored Oreo. And I am certainly an equal opportunity Oreo man. I just want to put that out there. Any and all Oreos have a place in my heart. Some are certainly better than others. I think OG is one of the best ways to go with the Oreo. But if it means that they'll send me stuff for free, I can fight them too. I can say that my least favorite thing is the original double stuffed Oreo, and that, Oreo is terrible. I don't think they're going to send me any. Anyway, moving on. Other things I saw in the news. That was very desperate, what I just did right there. I can't even get over it. Oreo, if you're listening still, I'm cool with you sending me products. Now I've just done it blanketly. A slender model went to social media. Her name is Caroline, and then a very difficult to pronounce last name. So I'm just going to say Caroline B for the sake of this and not get it wrong. She's a professional model. She said that she's recently been asked to wear a fat suit to appear more plus size in some ads. Her clip, which she put up on social media, and I'm amazed she did, because there was no scenario where people were going to be happy to hear this information. There was no one that was going to feel bad for her that she has to fake being larger for, modeling ads. And in the society we're in right now, even though I don't necessarily feel angry at her, so many people will get angry at this. And I can't believe she doesn't have a team of people to tell her. But it got viewed hundreds of thousands of times. And several people either got mad at the fashion industry as a whole or got mad at her for, of course, taking the job of someone who is, actually the size that she was pretending to be. I do love, and I was tempted to play you her audio where she talked about, actually having this be something that people are telling her to do because of how upset she seems about it. And yet she is obviously a working model who's getting more gigs. And I would certainly do this, by the way, in any form, not just that specific thing. But I guess I can be bought. I don't think that this would be a problem for me at all. I don't think I would struggle with someone being like, well, we'll pay you a bunch of money and you'll get to be in an ad for this product, but you got to put on, a terrible looking outfit or anything. I honestly think you got to be dressed in fully Oreos. I think I'm fine with that. She seemed to think she was going to get a lot more sympathy on social media. I don't know if eventually she'll delete it. She said also at one point that it doesn't even really look realistic. And several of the people who commented on her page said something similar. Some saying that things like her face didn't match the appearance of her body. All of this, though, again, feels so, and not that I'm trying to be utterly woke, but feels so not acceptable in the current society we're in. And you'd think a 22-year-old person would know that to begin with. But no, she created a controversy of her own. And she has been hired to do all different kinds of sizes, by the way. She is typically petite, but she has modeled everything from an XL to a 5XL set of products. And she hopes, I guess, to get less work next year, which I think probably will happen. I'm sorry, Caroline. We'll try to do better for you. A quick break, a lot more. Craig Collins filling in. Chad Benson Show.
This is the Chad Benson Show. Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show, and I know that Mayor Bill de Blasio won't be in office for much longer, which is just fine. I still laughed out loud when I saw him say this on television. I think this was actually earlier today because I can't comprehend what world he lives in, like what he thinks he did, what he thinks he's advocated for in the world of facing COVID. But he was asked about canceling the Times Square celebration, and his answer, it actually, I think, slowly exploded my brain. It had to slowly waft over you and come back in for you to be like, what did he say?
Given that New York is yet again the epicenter, given that some local officials are calling for you to cancel the in-person event altogether, why not scale back that event even further?
Look, I don't believe in shutdowns. We have to fight our way through COVID. And the way to do it is vaccination. We have the strongest vaccine mandates in the country. And now 91%.
All right, now it all sounds like him. It was just that the first thing. Look, I don't believe in shutdowns. That's not something I would ever do. I don't know what you're talking about. I ignore everything. Do you think like some politicians wake up in the morning and erase the previous day as if a computer did it? Like, is that how it works to be in that world of even our president seems to not remember, although maybe that's another thing happening, but not remember any of the stuff he said about getting tests more widely available in order to prevent from a lack of testing over a year ago. Any of the conversations he had about obviously completely ending this pandemic. And I wish I just lived in that world, to be honest, because it's not new to complain about politicians saying one thing, having just done the other recently. But I wish that the rest of us could, for like a few days, play by those rules. Say you got fired from a job and then you wanted to politician your way back into it. You would just show up the next day and pretend you weren't fired. And no matter what they said or did, you would object to them by not answering their questions. How did you get back in this office? Well, I still work here. You would just keep going because that would be playing by those rules. But all of us can't do it. Only they can. I also saw this. I loved this quite a bit more in a genuine way, not a laughing at way like de Blasio. But I loved the fact that Cynthia Garrett was booked to be on, I think this was Fox News, to talk about some of the crazy things going on in the world of some education, some schools. One school board has pushed for extra pay for, quote, non-white teachers. Now, no matter how you feel about any of the things in the world we live in now and how fair or unfair things are, that's racism. Paying people more money because of their race, or doing the opposite, not paying people more money because of their race, is simply racism. And that question or that topic caused a heck of a rant from one Cynthia Garrett, who is a podcaster and television host. And I quite enjoyed the entirety of this rant. Take it away, Cynthia.
And I got to tell you, makes me think about Ruby Bridges. You know, because it's not, November was the anniversary of November 14th, I believe it was, 1960, when a tiny little 6-year-old black child became the first child to integrate a school in the South, in New Orleans. And, you know, she went to school with 4 federal marshals. She had people throwing stuff at her and screaming at her and bringing coffins to school with black baby dolls. And only one teacher would teach her, Mrs. Barbara Henry. Now, they were in a classroom alone, Sean. And I'm sure Mrs. Henry felt unsupported and isolated, just like Ruby did. But you know what they did? They sucked it up and they put on their big girl pants and they found support in each other, because that's what integration is about. It's about understanding that support comes in all ages, races, shapes, and sizes. I don't need only black people to support me. Yes, you can find something in common with people that look like you, but that's not what we're really here for. What about the big melting pot of America? This is a country that is built on a shared experience. And Ruby Bridges, her foundation is so beautiful because the whole point of her foundation is to actually celebrate the sharing of our differences and to attack racism through integration, not through segregation. This little 6-year-old child had more strength than these grown-ups today?
Yeah. I love every part of that, every part of the conversation, and all the ways in which we were talking about either splitting up kids by race in classrooms or paying some teachers more money than other teachers in order to, I guess, do something that would be some sort of a woke agenda. And I realize as I'm about to dive into this too, I just played a black woman's perspective, and that's okay. In 2021, almost 2022. I'm a white dude, though. I'm a white dude in my mid-30s. I don't know. I don't care. I'm going to give you my opinion because I have every right to do it. But I know that some might get mad about it. But truthfully, the way to, in my opinion, get through some of the issues that may still exist in our society as far as things that are unfair or still things that might be influenced by racist, individuals or just racist, whatever you want to call it, is to collectively all move past it. And I don't mean to deny the past, by the way, because I know some people would immediately hear that. And the reaction is, well, you want to pretend there was never slavery or there's never this or this never occurred. No, but you cannot move forward in a society. And I think Cynthia does a great point of putting that idea out there by continuing to indict the past in different ways or continuing to act as though the people that are still here right now today, whether they're children in classrooms or people working all throughout the country, are the ones that are effectively causing the problems that existed all those years ago. We need to just collectively find a way to, I guess, and this is now going to become a very odd kumbaya almost segment, just move past it. And there's no better way for me to articulate where I guess I think I'm coming from on that or how that's possible than to talk about my own upbringing. And this is an odd thing, again, for me to try to do. But here we go. I went to a bunch of schools that had very few black kids in them, but we always had at least one or two children that didn't look the same as me. I was taught all the different history lessons you needed to be taught in school. At no point did any teacher ever tell me it was my fault. And at no point did any teacher look at the one or two children that would be obviously also quite a bit impacted by talking about things like slavery and tell them that they were going to struggle in life because of me. So we were all capable collectively to be educated on how to treat each other fairly and how to ignore things like race as best we could every single day, all the time. And I think that that's what we're still teaching to kids every day. And that's honestly one of the things that certainly is a part of the much more extreme versions of woke life is that we ignore these things. And that alone gets us to a place where none of these types of, I guess, unfair kinds of policies or treatment are in effect. It's a meritocracy, as you hear all the time. And so if you start, and honestly, I know that always sounds, because I can think of all the people I've heard before me make this argument and then, die on the attacks backward from those who say that you're just not honoring or caring about the things that happened in the past. But honestly, it's even, this is an odd comparison. I'm going to make it, and then we're going to take a quick break. But it's similar to our reactions now. This is nuts. I can't believe I'm going here. Let's define separation in these topics. I'm finding a unique, specific connection between what I was talking about involving racism and what I'm about to talk about involving government involvement in our lives due to things like public health scares like COVID. I'm walking this line, and I'm probably not doing it well. But here's the thing. If we govern based on the past, we are told in the world of science, in the world of medicine, how bad that is, that everything is always changing, everything is always evolving. So when you govern as though the latest variant of COVID is the same as the other ones, when it's not, you wind up in a place where the policies, the things you're creating, however well-intentioned, are not accurate to the times we live in. That same basic sentiment is what I'm trying to say may be true in the world of these arguments about fixing whatever racial injustices still exist in our society. Overly focusing on the high-profile case, if it's a police officer and a minority person, or overly focusing on this story and that story and acting as though that is the entirety of our society, means we create things like this, things where a school board thinks it's appropriate to pay non-white teachers more money, when essentially what many people would say is that's still certainly racism. And so I guess, as I just tried to tie two topics together that probably shouldn't have been, that the end result is, if you think about how to handle the problems that face us today, and you do that within the here and now, you are much more likely to solve a problem than if you're doing it by thinking of a history that may no longer be applicable. There we go. I tried to sum it up. Now I'm going to abort and take a quick break. A lot more. Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show. Silly stuff coming up next.
Check out our Chad Benson Show Facebook page where you can hang out or hang your grievances out to dry. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins, filling in. Just quickly, Tesla is recalling almost 500,000 of its electric cars. This is due to a safety concern. This is in Model 3 and Model S vehicles. Two separate technical defects that can increase the risk of accidents are being mentioned. The recall affects a total of 475,318 Tesla vehicles, including mostly Model 3s and about 100,000 Model S's. But that's a lot of Teslas, by the way. The company produced and delivered about 500,000 vehicles worldwide for the year 2020. So pulling back that many is about a full year's worth of vehicles. These are vehicles created between 2017 and 2021, by the way. Tesla is asking owners to get the latch device repositioned at a service center in order to make sure that things are safe. Interesting to see those kind of stories in the news, especially when it's specific to Tesla, which I guess everyone has even more interest in. They are also trying to prevent people from playing video games inside their vehicles. Something, I guess, an update they had to push out to their software as well. So, yeah, totally not worried about those two stories collectively, that people might play video games in Teslas and they might not be technically sound, depending on which one you're driving. Anyway, moving on. It's almost the new year. I can't dwell in stuff like that for too long. I like this story a lot. This is out of Oregon. A gym is on the hunt for an individual that is misusing the sauna area of the bathroom. They are calling him, quote unquote, pee guy. Already, I'm finding it funny. About 53,000 people have interacted with this on Reddit. I don't want to say any more. Calling him a trashy person, whoever it is, that hasn't been found yet. About 15,000 more people think that he's mildly infuriating. And several people said that he might just be a ghost, that they don't know who he is. But essentially, he's a dude who is doing what you've probably figured out by now, going to the sauna part of the gym and then also not getting out to go to the restroom, which is just the meanest, the most inhuman, to me, just insensitive or whatever else you want to say it, thing you could possibly do in there. And he's going number one because that is just awful. Just every part of what is going to be created when you go ahead and walk out of the sauna is not at all okay. And man, that's such a bland take. And honestly, taking it a step further, like the sauna area, the gym is not always a comfortable or fun spot in general. At certain times, some of the individuals who are in there are going to go rogue in a lot of different ways. However, I've never dealt with anyone that would pee in there. So I also will add to the amount of people looking to take this guy down. I hope this happens. It'll be a valuable 2022 as long as they bust this guy as soon as possible. Because I don't even understand. To be honest, I'm trying to move on to other things, and yet I'm obsessed with someone who's that inconsiderate of a person that's just like, yeah, I'm just going to do this now in this very hot room, and then I'm going to leave it and screw everybody else. Essentially, that person needs to have several New Year's resolutions, all of them really, really valuable. In other news, I'm going to try to lift us up a little bit here. I do like this story. It's not surprising what they found in the world of a study, I guess. But apparently reading fiction books just for fun will improve your language and mental skills, your cognitive abilities, as much as reading like really difficult material. And this is just, I guess, kind of, I guess there's a shade of what I said might not be accurate. You're not going to learn as much as if you challenge yourself to gain knowledge through a topic, but you're going to have your brain practice all the same things as valuably. And some of you are then going to be awesome at trivia. But this includes books like The Hunger Games, Harry Potter. Essentially, it doesn't have to be challenging material for you to benefit tremendously from reading these books. They studied about 200 undergraduate students. They looked at things like their language skills. They actually predicted things like their language skills based on a bunch of the testing that they would have to get into college, like SAT-style things. And then also, they asked how much book reading they did. Author recognition was also part of this. And I wonder if a whole lot of people were able to recognize the name J.K. Rowling, not because they read Harry Potter, which would be very sad, but very much the world for young people today. But I was glad to see that if I waste my time, if I read any books at all on something that others might judge me for, that apparently it's not true, that I'm not gaining any less of any worse of an experience than someone who is just telling me all the time about this great, very philosophical or some sort of other challenging topic book. I've now outed myself. Yes, there's someone in my life who reads a very deep dive philosophical books and tries to get me to read them all the time. And I can't. I can't get there as much as maybe I should, or as much as obviously they want me to. Just one other quick thing. I know we got to take a break in just a bit here. I had mentioned some of these the other day. I'm going to revisit some of them after this break, though. The cultural wars that dominated 2021. There is one on the list that I'm really confused as to why we think that this had to dominate the past year, and I wonder if you feel that way too. But that coming up in just a bit. Craig Collins filling in just before the holiday on the Chad Benson Show. Chad is back after this holiday weekend, so don't worry. You'll hear from him soon.
The Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. Thrilled to be here with you just in time for the holidays. I want to play some audio of a conversation that Dr. Scott Gottlieb was having. He is the former FDA commissioner on, I believe this was C-SPAN. I just really like the way in which he broke down some aspects of what is new about the latest pandemic, if that's what we want to call it, the Omicron variant of COVID, and how some of the data is quite a bit different than the data that we had seen in the past for several reasons. So here's Dr. Gottlieb.
It's a major wave of infection. We're seeing infections hit this country very hard. Places like New York City, Florida, the Maryland region are very hard hit right now. There are some indications, though, that Omicron's starting to peak in some of the European cities that were hit hard, particularly London. And I suspect that we may be a couple of weeks away from a peak in New York City. And despite the very high levels of infection that we're seeing around the country, and it's going to get worse before it gets better, we're seeing a very clear decoupling between the number of cases that are accruing on a daily basis and the impact it's having in terms of hospitalizations and people getting very sick. And that's probably a function of two features of this virus. One is that the virus is probably innately less virulent than prior strains, and there's now a good amount of evidence, preclinical evidence in laboratories and animal studies demonstrating that this virus may be less virulent than prior strains. And also it's hitting a population that has a very high level of immunity. We've built a very high wall of immunity in the U.S. population through a combination of vaccination and also prior infection. And people who have some immunity, either through vaccination or through being previously infected with the virus or both, have intact immune responses to prevent them from getting very severe symptoms of Omicron.
Now, I played all that audio because no matter how many times I say what is essentially the same sentiment, I'm never going to say it like that. And I'm never going to understand it to the degree that I know he does. And I just wish that more of the medical and scientific community would articulate things like that, because as demonstrated in that few minutes of information that was poured out all over C-SPAN viewers, he mentions those who are vaccinated as well as those who had previously been infected. He mentions and actually there was audio before it where he gets a little bit into the details of how this variant of COVID might have been created and how it's different than the variants that we may have expected, since we expected things that might be small changes that are much closer to how Delta is as far as a variant of COVID goes. But this one was just sort of an offshoot that he actually had stated had probably been developing for over a year on its own in different populations throughout the world. And all of that information essentially provides the same basic expectation that I've been saying a lot, that even if it spreads, and even if it spreads significantly so as it's doing throughout the country, we need to understand it tremendously differently as far as the amount of concern, risk, anything that we would put into it. And that's just the professionals saying that, but I wanted to play at least one of them as I continue to echo those statements today. I want to move on to this. You know, what's really amusing to me is that the political games we play in our society rely a lot, and I believe I've talked about this before too, on calling you to action via hatred, trying to get you to get so angry that your anger forces you to go to something like a ballot and vote. Go to the ballot box, cast a vote against someone that you hate. And we've never seen that more weaponized than in the past administration. I absolutely believe that the Democratic Party utilized every bit of believing that their supporters and those that might be in the middle may hate Donald Trump, may hate him so much so, and this is hardly earth-shattering information, that Nancy Pelosi is still investigating what happened on January 6th and planning, I think I saw this recently, to start unveiling whatever findings, quote-unquote, they have, we get closer and closer to the midterm elections. Totally accidentally. That's obviously, a coincidence. We also have this. CNN put what many are calling an unhinged guest on television to talk about how former President Trump is still, quote, a leader of a terror movement. That would be her take on the former president. Obviously, I think this is utterly untrue and ridiculous as far as a take goes. But it's just interesting that they platform this person, which I guess I'm also about to do, and the way in which she reacts to quoting what she said about a year ago. And I'm only going to play a little bit of it. But to me, it's entertaining in how insane it is. I hope we're on the same page. And I hope that for those that think she's kind of sort of right, that you realize you're being used, that you're being manipulated as much as anyone else to just hate, to have the Trump derangement syndrome thing take over so that you vote anti-Republican time and again. Let's try it out.
To gear up for 1/6 anniversary coverage, was posting my take then. Many criticized this for calling Trump the leader of a terror movement who uses violence or threat as an extension of politics. After a year, I think I was too kind. So if you think you were too kind to call him a extremist leader then, what would you call him now?
Here we go.
Well, he continues to be the leader of an organization that uses violence or the threat of violence to disrupt democratic processes. That is terrorism. And I think, we tend to focus on different pieces of the post-January 6th world.
You know what? I'm done. I'm already done. I was going to try to play more, and then I couldn't do it. Here's the thing about this take and about how this take reimagines itself in other worlds is the group she's talking about is Republicans. She's talking about half of the country, half of the people who vote a certain way for all different kinds of reasons. She's lumping them all into one group and deciding that they're a terrorist organization. I can't imagine what it's like to go to, like, say, a dinner party with this person. I imagine politics does come up fairly quickly and just based on mathematical odds, although I know we all kind of weed out people in our lives for whatever reason. That's society as we know it today that disagree with us. But she's going to wind up sitting next to someone that she believes is, I guess, an extension of terrorism via her take on the former president. And it's just, oh, man, when I saw some of the reactions to it, too, and those that agree with it, I know how we got to the place we're in. And a lot of people blame, I guess I should say, on one side of the aisle, blame our past president for this. But this is a continued version on both sides of the aisle of using what we've found in social media and other places is the most powerful form of motivation. Make you angry. Make you so incredibly mad that all you can possibly do is go try to, fix the problem by voting for the other team, whoever the other team may be. And that is just deranged, to be entirely honest. And anyone that knows anybody that probably voted differently than them, and maybe that's really the problem. Maybe what I've touched on now is that she has absolutely no one in her life that will admit to her that they vote Republican, and so she can't even fathom what someone like that would be like. And it actually reminds me of some of the stuff you hear on The View when some of the, very hot takes on that channel or on that, program include things like, I don't understand how anyone could possibly be a Republican. Yeah, we're totally going to find a place of understanding each other. And I can't believe I'm about to do this, to steal the words of Michelle Obama, who I think people are talking about as potentially trying to get forced by Democrats to run for president in the next presidential election. That's certainly going the high road to torch every single person in a party and call them all, terrorists. That's great. We're doing great work, people, just before the holiday. Anyway, let me move on to this because I do. I visited this story a little bit yesterday. Some of the top things that we feel were culture wars that dominated our past year. And there's one of them that I just couldn't get over, and it's the Let's Go Brandon one. It was mentioned as one of the 7 things that were the biggest issues in the world of, I guess they're saying culture, but you could also just say political differences. The other ones, by the way, just examples on the list, the pandemic and the arguments that exist there, that feels much bigger to me than Let's Go Brandon. Everything that's changing in our society because of woke culture and whether or not you think it should. Maybe things that because of nostalgia you remember from your childhood and don't understand why they're becoming problems. Woke corporations and how they're destroying some of America. These are the other things that are being listed. CRT, and then you get Let's Go Brandon. I mean, how is this even something that I think half of people, obviously people on a certain side of the aisle, behave as though it's so, incredibly different than what we see before. This wouldn't make lists, and I hate to beat the same drum again on this point too, but we wouldn't have made lists of the most influential topics or cultural wars in our society when our past president was in office, and even included the hatred for that president by people like that woman that I just played that popped up on CNN, because it was, it was common. It was everyday life. It was whatever. That's just a normal thing. No news here, nothing to look at. But a phrase that is running wild and has been for a few months now, that was just a funny moment in a NASCAR, after a NASCAR race. Truthfully, that's all it really was a moment where a reporter translated or changed a very different chant into Let's Go Brandon, which is real fun. Like, if you just 1 second, I'm going to try real hard one more time to convince everyone that this issue is nowhere near as important as some people think it is, and then I'm going to give up forever on it. But it is super amusing to change something that is, very bad words, and then a president, the part about the president doesn't matter, into the phrase, Let's Go Brandon. If someone did that in your life, if you walked by somebody and said, hey, those words to that person, and they thought you heard, and what the person thought you said was let's go, you'd laugh. We'd all laugh. So that occurred. And then the internet ran wild with it. And then because it's politically connected, obviously a lot of people that dislike what the president is doing have enjoyed the crap out of the phrase. But this is not a cultural war, people. This is not a situation where one side is fighting the other side based on anything other than the fact that one side gets so mad. Every time that they get upset, every time that this is said, it makes more people who find it entertaining find it more entertaining. So it boggles my mind to say it however I can, that this feels to some to be an important issue. It is legitimately funny, and it needs to not be thought of in a serious context anymore. Even if a guy says it to the president on Christmas Eve when he's calling up the Santa tracker and gets on with the president, that's just legitimately funny. I hope years from now we look back on Let's Go Brandon and think of it as one of the best accidental jokes the internet ever created. And yet I imagine at least half of us will not be able to do that. All right, I'm going to take a break. A lot more. Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show.
Being antisocial sucks. Hang with Chad's friends on Facebook, The Chad Benson Show. And if you just need some alone time, head on over to Twitter at Chad Benson Show. Either way, we can't wait to meet the real you.
This is The Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. Just one other quick thing that really amused me yesterday on the world of Twitter, social media. The President of the United States put out a tweet that many people found downright hilarious. Several people, including politicians, were asking if it was legitimately April Fool's Day, or if someone went rogue and got this account. The tweet that caused this controversy is legitimately one of my favorite, too. It said, "We're ending 2021." This is the POTUS Twitter account, 21, with what one analyst described as the strongest first-year economic track record of any president in the last 50 years. Let's keep the progress going. One analyst described that is like a terrible gum commercial at the very best of it. Like 1 in 5 dentists sort of like this gum. I love that tweet so much. I really hope Biden put it out himself. He was like, how many we talked to that like what we're doing? None? Can we find one? Can we just get one? Or just don't say that. Just say something like, hey, I can't even fix it. I was going to try to fix it, but if you need it to be singular and not plural, there's nothing I can do. There's no way around this. I just would have packed it in and not tweeted that day. But so many people loved this and said that it's one of the biggest jokes they'd ever seen from a POTUS account. Remember, our former President Trump was often highlighted or often attacked, whatever the word might be, for all the different things he'd put on social media. None of them feel to me to be better than that. Hey, look, we're doing great this year because one guy said it. I wish I could do this in my profession, too. To be like, I know that Chad Benson, tremendously more talented than me, and you guys are thinking about not having me be a fill-in host anymore, but one listener really loves me, so please, let me keep jumping on when Chad is away. I don't think that would work. I feel like the powers that be would think that was not a good enough excuse, and then I highlight the president, and then probably I get given all my things. All right, let's move on. Other things in the news. Well, these are not in the news. Other things I like out there in the world. There is a viral trend of judging what you choose to do on your holiday because they claim this is what a lot of people on social media anyway are claiming it says a lot about you. If you go glamping, you're very wealthy. I guess I'm not terribly surprised by that one. And actually bragging about glamping is equivalent to a, quote, humble brag because you're really just talking about how much you make for a living. Depending on some of the other things you might do, if you go on a Caribbean cruise, you might be on a grown-up version of a school trip, which means, I guess, you might be... I feel like this is all just people that are mad. To be honest, because I'm reading through every single one of these things, and it's all a super negative take on a very generic version of a trip a lot of people or a vacation a lot of people would take. So maybe this is all coming from the subset of social media that is way too noisy, that gets our attention way too often, that are just stuck in their basements, not taking any of these kind of trips or doing anything fun for the holidays. But a Caribbean cruise apparently means you're both lazy and immature because it's essentially a grown-up version of a class field trip. That is woefully inaccurate. Going bird watching is for couples who like to wear pajamas and stay in all day. That's just mean. And that's not even something that I think a lot of people would be jealous of. Some people bird watch. A lot of others probably don't care. Going to Vegas means that you're a man who's having a middle-aged crisis, a midlife crisis. What? I don't totally understand that, although I know that it would be fun if I was someone who was in the midst of a midlife crisis. That's a place I would definitely go. I think we go there for other reasons, too. I feel bad for the guy that, went to Vegas for just, a show. Like, the dude that's just hanging out. He's not doing any of the stereotypical Vegas things that make these Twitter people so mad, and now he's lumped in. Now he's being told he's got a midlife crisis, too, and he just wanted to see, Taylor Swift or whoever it is, I don't know who's performing now, Britney Spears, one more time. A boutique hotel, if that's where you choose to go, is demonstrating that you're certainly middle class. I'm done with this report. Every one of these is people just angry. This is why the internet proves to me time and again that even though it makes me laugh and entertains me, it's mostly just full of a bunch of awfulness. All right, one other quick thing before we get out of here, and we're just about out of time. I guess this is also not necessarily a positive last moment, but for anyone that's in a cuffing season relationship, that means you got in a relationship, as 45% of singles do for the holiday. Maybe it's good news. It's almost over. Most people will break up just after the new year. So happy new year to all. including those who are no longer with that person they only kind of sort of liked and stayed with for the holidays. On that note, Craig Collins, see you later. Chad Benson Show.
This is the Chad Benson Show.